The Seasteading Odyssey, Engineering Sovereignty. Chapter 1, The Liquid Void, The Philosophy of the Frontier. Welcome to Synapse Daily. Take a moment and look at a globe. What do you see? Most of us see the continents, the jagged edges of empires, the crowded cities, the lines drawn in the dirt by centuries of war. But if you spin that globe, you'll realize that the vast majority of our planet is a deep, sapphire blue. 70% of the Earth is water. Yet, for thousands of years, we have treated this space as a void. A highway for trade or a graveyard for the forgotten. We are a land-based species, trapped in a land-based mindset. But in 1975, in the sun-drenched coastal offices of California, a group of radical visionaries decided that the land was full. They saw a world becoming rigid, overregulated, and stagnant. They looked at the Pacific horizon and saw not a barrier, but the ultimate frontier. This was the birth of the Seasteading Institute. The founding in 1975 wasn't just about maritime engineering, it was an act of philosophical rebellion. These pioneers realized that every square inch of dry land on Earth had been claimed by a sovereign state. If you wanted to start a new society, experiment with a new economy, or live under a different set of laws, you simply couldn't. The frontier was closed. Unless, of course, you could learn to live where no government could plant a flag. They called it seasteading, a play on homesteading. It was the idea that if you could build a permanent home in international waters, you could reclaim the human right to choose your own governance. This was the first spark in the liquid void. A dream of modular, floating nations that could unhook and drift away if their leaders became tyrants. Can you imagine the audacity? In an era of the Cold War and global tension, these Californians were planning an exit strategy from the planet's surface. Chapter 2, The 1975 Blueprint, The California Dream and the Spar Design. By mid-1975, the Seasteading Institute wasn't just talking, they were drafting. The atmosphere in California at the time was a unique blend of high-tech optimism and counterculture freedom. While NASA was looking at the stars, the seasteaders were looking at the abyss. They faced a fundamental question: how do you build a city on a surface that is constantly moving? The ocean is a brutal architect. It uses wind, salt, and pressure to destroy anything man-made. To solve this, the 1975 blueprints introduced a revolutionary concept, the spar platform. Imagine a giant vertical cylinder, like a massive pencil floating in the water. Most of its length is deep beneath the waves, weighted with ballast. Because the majority of the structure is below the turbulent surface, the city on top remains perfectly still. While a massive storm might toss a traditional ship like a toy, a spar-based seastead remains as stable as a skyscraper in Manhattan. These early designs weren't just about stability, they were about modularity. The founders envisioned a Lego city approach. Each home, each office, each farm would be a separate floating unit. If you didn't like your neighbors, or if the local government passed a law you hated, you could literally detach your pod and sail to another cluster. This was the invention of competitive governance. For the first time in history, the government would have to compete for its citizens, rather than the other way around. The 1975 blueprints in California laid the groundwork for a world where your country was something you chose, not something you were born into. It was the ultimate Silicon Valley hack, decades before the internet was even a household name. Chapter 3, The Energy Revolution, OTEC and the Battery of the Abyss. You cannot have a civilization without energy. In 1975, as the world reeled from the first global oil crisis, the Seasteading Institute realized that their floating nations needed to be energy independent. They couldn't rely on tankers from the shore. They needed to harness the ocean itself. This led them to a forgotten scientific marvel, OTEC, ocean thermal energy conversion. The physics is beautiful in its simplicity. The sun beats down on the tropical ocean, heating the surface water to a balmy 25 or 30 degrees Celsius. Meanwhile, just a kilometer below, the water is near freezing. The seasteaders designed systems to use this temperature difference to drive a steam turbine. It is essentially a solar battery that covers 70% of the planet and never runs out. But OTEC provided more than just electricity. It provided life. When you pump that cold, nutrient-rich water from the deep to the surface, you trigger a process called upwelling. This mimics the most productive natural environments on Earth, like the coast of Peru. Suddenly, an ocean desert, a place where nothing grows, is transformed into a lush, biological powerhouse. The Seasteading Institute's 1975 vision included massive floating greenhouses and vertical kelp forests. They realized they could feed the world and power it simultaneously, all while sequestering carbon from the atmosphere. They weren't just building houses, they were building an artificial ecosystem. They were planning to turn the blue void into a green engine for humanity. This was the technical heart of the 1975 movement, a belief that through engineering, we could live in harmony with the ocean rather than just exploiting it. Chapter 4: The Legal Abyss, Sovereignty and the Unclosed Struggle. As the 1970s progressed, the Seasteading Institute hit its most difficult wall, not waves, but laws. In 1975, international waters were the Wild West. But by the early 80s, the United Nations was finalizing the UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. This treaty sought to divide the ocean into exclusive economic zones, giving land-based nations control over everything within 200 miles of their coast. The seasteaders found themselves in a legal battle for the very concept of sovereignty. A land-based nation's power comes from its territory. But if your territory moves, what are you? Are you a ship? Are you a platform? Or are you a new kind of sovereign entity? The Institute's legal team in California argued that the high seas belonged to no one and therefore to everyone. They studied the Principality of Sealand, a tiny fort in the North Sea that claimed independence, as a legal precedent. This chapter of the story is filled with flag hopping and legal chess. The Seasteading Institute realized that to survive, they needed to find a host nation, a country willing to grant them a special maritime zone where they could experiment with new laws. This was the birth of the Special Economic Sea Zone. It was a dangerous game. Land-based governments viewed seasteading as a threat to their monopoly on power. If people could escape to the ocean, who would pay the taxes? Who would follow the old rules? The 1975 dream was being squeezed by the crushing weight of global bureaucracy. But as we will see in the next chapters, the harder the world pushed against the seasteaders, the more creative their solutions became. They weren't just building cities, they were building a new definition of freedom itself. Chapter 5: Biorock and the Living Foundation, the Alchemical City. If you are going to live on the ocean for centuries, steel and concrete aren't enough. Salt water is a corrosive beast, it eats through the strongest alloys. But in the late 1970s, a visionary architect named Wolf Hilberts, working closely with the spirit of the Seasteading Institute, discovered a cheat code for marine construction. He called it Biorock. The process is pure alchemy. You take a simple steel frame and submerge it. Then, you pass a low-voltage electric current powered by your OTEC system through the metal. A miraculous chemical reaction occurs. The minerals naturally present in seawater, like calcium and magnesium, begin to crystallize. Within weeks, the steel is coated in a thick layer of limestone. This material is 3 times stronger than standard concrete. But here is the mind-blowing part: it's alive. If a storm cracks the foundation of your city, you don't send a repair crew. You simply turn up the voltage. The minerals will grow back into the crack, healing the city like a biological organism. The Institute's 1975 vision wasn't just about floating platforms, it was about growing artificial coral reefs that could support entire skyscrapers. Imagine a city that gets stronger as it ages, filtering the water and providing a home for millions of fish while it keeps you safe. This was the ultimate marriage of technology and biology, a city that breathes with the ocean. Chapter 6: The Blue Economy, the Engine of the Abyss. Critics of the Seasteading Institute often asked, but what do you actually do out there? How do you pay the bills? The answer lies in the blue economy, a concept that the 1975 founders saw as the successor to the industrial age. On land, we are running out of resources. On the ocean, we haven't even started. The first pillar of this economy is restorative aquaculture. Forget traditional fish farming that pollutes the water. Seasteads use vertical ropes to grow kelp, scallops, and oysters in a 3D system. Kelp is the supercrop of the future. It grows at an incredible speed, requires zero fertilizer, and cleans the ocean of excess nitrogen. But the real wealth is deeper. The Seasteading Institute pioneered bioprospecting near hydrothermal vents. Down in the dark, extremophile bacteria live in conditions that would kill any other creature. Their DNA contains the enzymes for the next generation of life-saving antibiotics and anti-aging treatments. A seastead isn't just a place to live, it's a floating laboratory at the edge of the known world. By 1975, they knew that the first ocean trillionaire wouldn't be someone who mined gold, but someone who mastered the genetic secrets of the deep. Chapter 7: The Digital Shift, the New Guard and the Startup Nation. As we moved into the 21st century, the 1975 California vision received a massive adrenaline shot from Silicon Valley. The philosophy of seasteading perfectly matched the disrupt everything mantra of the tech world. In 2008, Patrick Friedman, grandson of the legendary economist Milton Friedman, took the reins to modernize the Institute's mission. He brought with him the financial backing of Peter Thiel and the logic of software engineering. They began to view governments as operating systems. If you don't like the OS on your phone, you switch it. Why can't you do the same with your country? This era introduced the Startup Nation concept. The goal was to lower the barrier to entry for creating a new society. By using the modular designs envisioned in 1975, the New Guard proposed a world of competitive governance. If one seastead offered better healthcare or lower taxes, people would move there. This forces governments to be efficient in kind, or risk losing their citizens to the waves. It was the ultimate free market experiment. They weren't just escaping the law, they were trying to create a better version of it. The dream of 1975 was no longer a hippie fantasy, it had become a calculated, venture-backed blueprint for the future of human organization. Chapter 8: The Great Salt Conflict, the French Polynesia Experiment. In 2017, the dream almost became a physical reality. After decades of legal battles, the Seasteading Institute signed a historic memorandum of understanding with the government of French Polynesia. For the first time, a sovereign nation invited the seasteaders to build in their waters. They called it the Floating Island Project. It was supposed to be its special economic sea zone in a protected lagoon. But as soon as the ink was dry, the conflict began. The local population in Tahiti saw the project as a form of digital colonialism. They feared that wealthy tech elites would build a private paradise while the locals suffered from rising sea levels. The clash was intense. On one side, you had visionaries talking about the future of humanity and solving climate change. On the other, you had islanders protecting their sacred lagoons and their mana. The project faced massive protests and political pressure. By 2018, the government of French Polynesia officially distanced itself from the deal. The experiment collapsed, leaving the seasteaders with a bitter lesson: you can solve the engineering, and you can solve the energy, but you cannot ignore the human element. The ocean might be empty, but the politics of the land will always try to follow you out to sea. Chapter 9: The Thailand Incident, the First Blood. While the Institute in California was navigating the boardroom battles of French Polynesia, a small group of pioneers decided that the time for talking was over. In 2019, Chad Elwertowski and Nadia Summergirl took the 1975 blueprint and turned it into a reality off the coast of Phuket, Thailand. They built a simple, white, octagonal cabin on a steel spar. It was the world's first truly independent seastead. They weren't a corporation, they were a couple living their dream of autonomy. But the dream turned into a nightmare in less than 2 months. The Thai government didn't see a peaceful home, they saw a threat to their national sovereignty. They accused the couple of deteriorating Thailand's independence, a charge that carries the death penalty. The Thai Navy was dispatched. In a heart-pounding sequence of events, Chad and Nadia had to flee their home just hours before the military arrived to dismantle it. This was the first time blood and salt met in the modern seasteading movement. It proved that the 1975 vision was dangerous. It proved that land-based states are terrified of the ocean's potential for freedom. The incident sent shockwaves through the global community, forcing the Seasteading Institute to rethink their entire strategy. How do you build a city when the world's navies are pointing their guns at you? Chapter 10, Panama and the Seapods, the Commercialization of Liberty. After the trauma in Thailand, the movement needed a win. They needed a place where the government wouldn't see them as enemies, but as partners. They found it in Panama. This gave birth to Ocean Builders, a company that took the 1975 modularity and gave it a 21st century Elon Musk makeover. They moved away from the idea of escaping society and toward the idea of improving life. They created the Seapod. These are stunning, minimalist structures that look like giant white pearls floating on the water. They are built on the same spar technology perfected in California decades ago. But inside? They are smart homes. Drones deliver your sushi. High-speed satellite internet connects you to the global economy. Sensors monitor the health of the coral reefs below your floorboards. This was the iPhone moment for seasteading. By 2022, the first Seapods were being sold to pioneers, tech workers, and retirees. It wasn't a state yet, but it was a neighborhood. It proved that you didn't have to be a hardcore survivalist to live on the water, you just had to want a better view and a more sustainable lifestyle. The 1975 dream had officially become a consumer product. Chapter 11, The Environmental Guardian, Repairing the Blue Heart. As we move into the mid-2020s, a new narrative has emerged. Seasteading is no longer just about politics, it's about saving the planet. We are currently facing a climate catastrophe. The oceans are warming, and the reefs are dying. But the Seasteading Institute's 1975 vision of regenerative seasteading offers a solution that no land-based policy can match. Every seastead is designed to be a carbon sink. Through the massive growth of kelp and seagrass, fueled by the OTEC systems we discussed earlier, these floating cities can sequester gigatons of carbon directly from the atmosphere. But it goes deeper. The heave plates and spar bases of these cities act as giant heat exchangers. By bringing cold water from the deep to the surface, seasteaders can actually cool the surrounding ocean, preventing coral bleaching and stopping the intensification of hurricanes. A network of 10,000 seasteads wouldn't be a source of pollution, they would be a planetary cooling system. They are the gardeners of the sea, turning vast oceanic deserts into vibrant, oxygen-producing oases. This is the ultimate irony. The very people who were called escapists in 1975 may be the only ones capable of repairing the Earth's biological heart. Chapter 12, The Great Migration, the Climate Imperative. Now, let's look at the harsh reality of 2026. This isn't just about billionaires in pods anymore. Cities like Jakarta, Venice, and the Maldives are literally disappearing beneath the waves. Millions of people are becoming climate refugees. On land, there is no more room. The borders are closing. The Seasteading Institute's 1975 vision has become a climate imperative. We are witnessing the beginning of the Great Migration to the water. Instead of building walls to keep people out, we are building platforms to keep people up. Floating apartment complexes, floating schools, and floating hospitals are being deployed to the coasts of Southeast Asia and the Pacific. We are learning to live with the water instead of fighting it. The technology that began as a libertarian experiment in California is now a humanitarian lifeline. For the child in a sinking village in Kiribati, a seastead isn't a startup nation, it is a future where they don't have to leave their culture or their home just because the sea is rising. We are finally realizing that the ocean isn't our enemy, it is our sanctuary. Chapter 13, The 2026 Horizon and Beyond, the Final Frontier. We have come a long way since those first meetings in California in 1975. What began as a radical, almost crazy idea has evolved into a global movement that bridges the gap between engineering, environmentalism, and human liberty. As we look at the horizon in 2026, we see the first true blue cities beginning to cluster. The legacy of the Seasteading Institute is not just about the structures they built, but the mindset they changed. They taught us that the world is not a finished product. They taught us that if the current systems are broken, we have the right and the responsibility to build something new. The high seas are no longer a void. They are a canvas. We are the first generation in human history that has the choice to live anywhere. We are no longer tethered to the dirt. We are becoming a blue species. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the blue frontier. The pioneers of 1975 didn't just give us a blueprint, they gave us a chance to start over. This has been Synapse Daily. The waves are high, the wind is strong, but the future is wide open. We'll see you on the water.